My name is Brian Chummer. I'm a DevOps consultant with Release Team, and in today's What Makes a Jira project, we're going to cover workflows. So if you've been following this series, we're covering what makes a Jira project, what makes that project work. And today we're going to talk about, like I just said, workflows. This is kind of a big topic, and we're going to cover a lot here. So be ready for a little bit of a long one. So if you have time, maybe get a snack, maybe get a drink, and let's get ready. So workflows are another backbone of your work items. It's how you define the life cycle of a work item from beginning to end. So with that being said, there is a lot that we're going to cover. There's a lot that workflows can do in your project and allow for a lot of flexibility, whether it be a project that is focused on development, a project that's focused on bug tracking, services, or HR, and anything in between. You can do a lot of things with workflows. So let's talk about what workflows are. We're going to see here that we're looking at one of our work items in our mobile dev project. So where's the workflow at? How do I know the life cycle of this ticket? You're going to look over here on the right hand side and you're going to see the first thing we have is a to do button. Now, this view is going to change. It's not always going to say to do. It's going to be whatever state this ticket work item is currently at. So right now we just happen to be at the to do status of our workflow. And as we click on it here, you're going to see that we have several other options. Accepted, architecture review, in progress, testing, done. These are the statuses of this workflow for this type of work item. Yes, you can change the workflows based on the work item type. So for this particular one, we're looking at a subtask. So it could have a different workflow than a story, than a bug, than an initiative, than an epic, than a question. So these are all statuses that we have here in this workflow. You're going to see different colors. So right now for these current statuses, we have blue for in progress, and then we have green for done. And you'll see that to do status is currently in gray, which is what we have this set to. One other thing you can always do when you're in a work item and looking at the workflow is you can view the whole workflow. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this, but this is just a read-only view so you can see what the workflow is from beginning to end, your tickets, work items life cycle from beginning to end. So you'll see here, it's going to be created. Then we have the to-do status, the done status, the architecture review, the testing, accepted, and in progress. And you'll see here on each one of these, it's going to have a little all on the side of these with the arrows. These are your transitions. So we can tell just by looking at this, if I was working on this work item, I could see that I could move between any of these statuses, between to anywhere, because they all have the all transition on there. And like I said, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this when we talk about the workflow editor and making changes to your workflow. Right now, we're going to hit the close button. So that's how a workflow looks when you're on a work item. Now, let's go ahead and let's get into more details about how workflow really shapes your project along with your work items and your work item types. So you'll see here we have workflows in our, once again, Jira admin view or admin view of this particular project. And then you'll see that we have a scheme similar to before that we talked about in other videos. Your scheme is a box where you can have the rest of these workflows, and those workflows could be assigned to each work item type that you have. So whichever work type you have, you can select a different workflow for it. So, like I said earlier, bugs could be different than tasks. Tasks can be different than stories, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and let's click the scheme. Now, as we go into the scheme, we enter our scheme view. From here, we can do a few things. We can, as you see, it's going to tell us the name of the scheme. We can add a workflow to the scheme. We can change the scheme. So if we wanted to change this project scheme to a different workflow scheme, we could do that by selecting Switch Scheme. From here, we could see which workflow is associated with the scheme or workflows, along with the work types that are associated with this specific workflow in the workflow scheme. And then we can also edit the workflow if we wanted to. So first, let's talk about how can we maybe add a workflow to an existing scheme. So we'll click Add Workflow, and we can select Add Existing. And from here, we can select a workflow that we think is appropriate. And you'll see in this window, when you select one, it's going to give you a preview of it. And you can view what statuses it has and kind of what transitions it has at a higher level. You're not able to dig into it to see if there's anything beyond those transitions, but you're at least able to get a view, a preview of that workflow. So now I want to go ahead and add this Jira workflow, which is a default Jira workflow, as the description describes here, to this workflow scheme. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit next. Now what I can do from here is I can now assign a work type to this workflow that I want to add. And it will show you here all the work types that you have in the project, along with the currently assigned workflow. This one's pretty simple because we know we only have one workflow. I actually want this to go to bugs. So I'm going to select the bug work type, and then I'm going to hit finish. So now nothing really has changed except for we now see the Jira workflow is added to the scheme. We'll see bug has been assigned to the Jira workflow. And right now it's only in a read only because we're using the Jira default workflow. But this is what is very important. Right now you're going to see an item up here. It says these are unpublished changes. So if I were to exit this screen right now, nothing would change. We would go back into this specific workflow scheme and it would still only have our single workflow because we didn't publish this draft. So there's a few options we could do here. We could publish the draft, we could discard the draft, or if we wanted to look at the original really quick, we could, and that would show us the differences between the original scheme and the current draft that we have. I want to publish this draft because I want this to go live. So when I hit this publish button, this will now go live. So we hit publish. Now there's one thing that we do have to do. Since we are changing from a workflow to a different workflow, they may not all have the same statuses. So there's one more thing that we have to do. When we're changing a workflow, we then have to map the statuses if the statuses are not the same in the target workflow. So you can see here our current status for this workflow is on the left-hand side, and the statuses, the target workflow we're moving to, are over here. So we need to map these statuses. And it's very simple. You just click and you choose one that makes sense. I'm going to move most of these blue ones to in progress. Done, I'm going to move to close, and then to do, I'm going to leave that as open. The next thing we have to do is we have to associate the mappings. It's going to take it just a second here to process. You're going to go ahead and get this bar letting you know that it is updating. And when your screen refreshes, it will go ahead and update the bar. You'll see here that our progress bar was already done. So we can go ahead and hit acknowledge. Now we see we don't have the publish message anymore. Our top right hand corner, we did have a message saying it was published. So now this workflow is live for all bug work types associated with this scheme. That's another thing to bring up. When you're making changes to schemes, if it's associated with more than one project, that is going to update the other projects as well that it's all associated with. So if I knew that this workflow scheme was related to other Jira projects minus just this mobile dev project, when I published this update, that would affect all of those. That's one thing to keep in mind with schemes, that it will update all the other projects if it is associated with it. How do you know if a scheme is associated with other projects? So there's a way to do that here. You're going to go up, if you have admin permissions, click on the cog. We're going to go over here to Jira admin settings and issues. You'll see on the left-hand side here, we do have workflows, and then we can select workflow schemes. And within this scheme, we're going to see what projects they are all assigned to. So you have the name of the current workflow scheme, the projects associated with it. It's going to show you the work types and the workflows, and you can also do actions such as editing and copying it. It does show here active, so these are ones that have been published that are out in the real world, out in your Jira instance being used today. We can minimize this and we will see that there are inactive ones. So these are the ones that are still draft or have just been unassigned. And it's going to show you the same information. So let's scroll down here and see if we could find any of these that are associated with multiple. Good thing is that the mobile dev project that we were updating the workflow scheme on, that scheme is only associated with just that project. I did know this beforehand, but this is always best practice to double check before you're making updates to a scheme and also workflows, which we will get into here in just a second. So that's the way that workflow schemes are going to really show your project, really guide your project into what workflows are being used for each work type. So now let's talk about workflows themselves. So we're back here on our summary screen for the mobile dev project, and we're looking at workflows. So one way I can look at the workflows is, once again, I can click on the scheme, and that's going to take me to the scheme screen page. And from there, I can edit a workflow. I can remove a workflow. I can also just view the workflow as a read-only way, as we saw earlier when we were looking on the work item itself, a read-only view. This is text. We can also choose that diagram view that we did before. So now you want to get into it. Maybe you want to edit it. You want to see what it's doing within that workflow. What's happening? Is there anything happening behind the scenes of the workflow? Maybe you need to add a new status. Maybe you need to add a new transition. So you can select Edit Workflow from the theme page. You can also edit the workflow directly from the summary page if you wanted to. You'll see here there is a pencil. That means you can edit it from there, or you can search the workflow in the admin issues page under workflows to see first if it's associated with any other project. So I think that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to copy this name. I'm going to go over here into the workflows Jira admins page here. And then I'm going to paste the workflow name, and I'm going to see the details of this workflow. So I can see the name. It is an active workflow. I can see that it's only included in the mobile dev project, and I can see which schemes it's a part of, and also the time it was last updated. You can also click on the ellipses under actions, and there you can view the workflow like we just did, edit the workflow, or make a copy of a workflow. But we're here to edit a workflow. So we're going to go ahead and hit edit. And now there's a few views that you could do when you're editing a workflow. We're currently on the diagram view. As you can see here, diagram is listed, or there is also text view. When in text view, you are going to have a little bit more information than what you have in diagram view. You're going to have the step name, the status, the transitions that it can go to, and then the actions where you can do edit and view properties. I'm a big fan of working in diagram view. So let's go ahead and let's switch to diagram view. So we're back here in diagram view, and there's a few things that we can do in here. You'll see on the top of the editor, we can add a status, we can add a transition, and we can show transition labels. I'm going to go ahead and select the show transition labels. You'll see now any transitions that we have are going to have a label on them. All does not because it already has a label on the transition. I like to have this on when I'm editing a workflow, just because if there's a lot of transitions going back and forth, I am able to see which transitions I'm looking for. So, what can we do within the actual editor itself? You can click and hold an area and you can drag it. You can click on a status, and you'll see when you click on a status is that you're going to get a pop-up over here on the right-hand side. It's going to show you the name of the status. It's going to have this either checked or unchecked. If you do not have it allowed to go to all transitions, then this would be unchecked. It's currently allowed in this workflow, so we're going to go ahead and leave that checked. We can completely remove the status. We can also edit the status. And then the last thing is properties. So let's go ahead, let's click on edit. From edit, we can now update the status. Now, when you're updating the status, you're not just changing it for this project or even just this workflow. That changes the status across the board. We are fundamentally making a change to a status that exists in Jira. So maybe you need a new status. Maybe you need to add a new status. You can do that. But one thing to keep in mind is if you go into edit a status and you change the name, that changes it for every single thing it's being used across every single workflow. Same if you add a description, a lot less riskier, but it will add a description and it will add it for that status and it will show up in any workflows that are using that status. And then the last thing is the category. We talked about this earlier. How is it labeled? How is it colored labeled? Right now, the way we have it set up is gray marks the to-do category, blue marks the in progress category, and green marks the done progress category. So if you were to make any changes on here, you would then hit save. We're not going to make any updates here. Remove status does exactly what it says. It will remove the status. That doesn't delete the status from the instance. It doesn't delete the status from your Jira site. What it does is it removes it from the workflow. And then there's properties. And this is one area where I'm going to say that you should go online, look at the Atlassian community, look at the Atlassian documentation. There's a lot of things that you could do inside of properties of a status and even a transition as well. So let's get back into our workflow. And let's say we want to add a status. So we're going to click add status. Now what we could do from here, as you'll see, is it's going to show us all the statuses that currently exist in our Jira instance. And we can simply go here, and if it's one that we do already want to use, that we already have, we can go ahead and select that. So I would like to go ahead and add pending to this workflow. Now, I can either allow it to have all statuses transition to this one, but maybe I don't. Maybe I need this one to go into pending. So we're going to go ahead and select add. You'll see here immediately that the status block shows up in your workflow editor, along with, once again, a pop-up. So visually, the first thing I like to do is put this in a place where it makes sense. So what I would like to do is have this pending status be a part of in progress. I would like a ticket. If it needed to go to pending status, it would have to be in progress first, and then you need it to transition back to one. So how do we add that transition? Well, there's a few ways to do it. You can select add transition up here, which it'll then take you to a screen. You'll see here we can select the from status to the next status, so it could go to in progress. We could give it a name, a description, and then if we had a screen that we wanted to put in there, we could. Maybe we needed there to be a comment, maybe a field needed to be filled out, some information added, or maybe just a checkbox clicked on a certain field. We can then hit add. So now we'll see here, since we have the transition label showing, the transition shows up as back to progress, what we just created. So I want to have a status where in progress can go to pending. So when you click on a status, you're going to see these little circles. That's where you can go ahead, click, hold, and drag, and it's going to take you to that exact same screen that we saw earlier. So in here, I will type pending, Maybe we had a screen. I'll go ahead and just select the screen so we have a pop-up appear. We will hit add. We cannot perform this type of operation on a giraffe workflow. So this is when having a copy of a workflow is beneficial. Since it is a current draft active workflow, we cannot perform this action. Now the good thing is I was already prepared for this and I wanted to show that in real time. I do have a copy of this workflow over here. So this is the workflow we're going to continue to edit. So let's go ahead and let's try to make that change again. So in progress, I'm just clicking, dragging, and holding over to pending. Let's go and type in the name, pending, spell it correctly. And then here, let's go ahead and add our default screen. Now, whenever you add a screen to a transition, no matter what that screen has, the comment field will always show up on that screen. So you could have a blank screen, call it default screen, or call it whatever you want to call it, maybe comment screen. Even if you didn't have any data on there or any Jira fields on there, that comment screen still pops up. So let's go ahead and let's hit add. So now, see, we're in an inactive workflow as it's labeled here. We are able to make that update when we weren't able to when it was a draft version, which is a draft of a live active workflow. So now we have this new status. We are able to go to that status from in progress and then back from it to progress. Now let's talk a little bit about these transitions. Let's say maybe within this transition, I needed some things to happen in the background. It's simple enough. Let's go ahead. Let's click on that transition. When you click on a transition, similar to when you click on a status, you're going to get a little screen over here on a little pop-up on the right-hand side. So we have pending over here. We'll see it will show if there's a screen. We have properties, which I once again encourage you to go out there, do a little bit of research on what you could do with properties. There's also triggers, conditions, validators, and post functions. And these numbers in the parentheses are going to show you how many of each are currently there. So let's go ahead and let's click on triggers. So whenever you click on triggers, you click on triggers, conditions, validators, post functions, or anything from here, with the exception of properties, it's going to take you to this screen. It's going to show you the transition. So we see we're in progress, going to pending. You can also view the properties here if need be. You can also delete and once again edit the transition from here as well. It's going to show us the screen, and now we have triggers that we can add. You'll see things such as pull request created, pull request merged, branch created. Those are things that are going to trigger the workflow to go to this transition. And then we have conditions. So maybe you have some fields that need to have data in them. There has to be some requirements met. We can go over here and select add condition. And there's going to be quite a few options that we could do here. I'm not going to cover all of these today, but there are quite a few that you can use. You can make sure a user is in a specific project role, maybe a group, previous statuses it's been a part of. Maybe you need to hide a transition from a user. Maybe management or only a handful of users are supposed to make this transition in the workflow to update that work item. This is where you can do that as well. So that transition would only appear for specific users. As you can see here, there are a lot of conditions that you can add in here. I would recommend you take a look at these and think about things that you could do here as well that's going to go within the workflow. So we'll hit cancel, and it's going to take us back to our screen. There's also validators. So the difference between conditions and validators, conditions are showing the transition, are making it so if I, the user, meet all the conditions, this transition will appear. Validators are the transition appears, but there needs to be some validation before it can actually go from its original status to its target status. And there's several items here. Date compare, certain fields may be required. This is where you can add a field required validator. So let's go ahead and let's choose a field to add as a validator to make sure that that field is there before it goes to that next transition. I want to make sure that there is a due date selected. You have just one or you can have multiple. You can include an error message as well. So you could put in here, please enter a due date. You could ignore context if you wanted to. It gives you a little show up here of what that means. You can then add this to the workflow, and now we'll see that we have a validator in here. The number does change. It shows the number 1. So that lets us know, okay, we now have a validator in here. Same thing would happen if we added a condition. So let's go ahead, let's add a condition. Let's make sure a user is in a project role. I want to make sure that it's just somebody who is a part of maybe the service desk team. I don't want someone maybe who's an admin to be able to move to this status, to this transition, through this transition. So we hit add and you'll see here, it's going to go ahead and give us a condition. And one thing is, we can either have it choose to be all of the following conditions. So if we had multiple conditions, we would want it to have it be all of those conditions, or you can have it to be any of the following conditions. So it only needs to meet one condition rather than all of them. We don't have that option in validators. Validators, it's going to validate. And then post functions. There needs to be certain steps that Jira has to take for it to completely categorize, update the database, update its own event triggers in the system. So you'll see here, these are typical ones that you're going to see all the time. And always at the end, a fire generic event that can be processed by the listeners. So we can add a post function, and post functions are very, very helpful. There are certain things you could do, such as assign to the current user. So you could have whoever is making that transition for the workflow, it could assign it to that user. You could have it assigned to a lead developer, maybe to the reporter. So let's say you're going from a in progress to waiting for customer. You could assign it back to that reporter, that customer. You could clear to field values. So maybe we had some conversation, a field was updated, but now we need to go back and that information isn't correct. We can clear that information. You can copy field values. You can set issue security level, which is another topic for another video. Webhook calls can be done. You can update a custom field and you can update an issue field. Now this one is really important. This one I use quite a bit because you can update issue fields pretty easy. And you'll see here the options that you have: assignee, description, environment, priority, resolution, summary, original estimate, remaining estimate, time spent, and parent. The reason I use this one a lot is because of this resolution. In Jira, Jira doesn't understand that a work item is done until it has a resolution. The status could say done. The status could say resolve. The status could say anything, no matter what. Jira doesn't see it as resolved until there is a value in the resolution field. And one of the best practices that I try to follow is having that resolution be updated by the workflow. So if I'm moving into a done status, I can update that resolution to done or to whatever resolutions we currently have available. So when you're creating or updating a workflow, make sure that you're keeping that in mind as well. You can also have a screen pop up if you want to have user interaction with the resolution field. You can have a screen pop up when you're ready for that ticket to be done in Jira's eyes. It can show the resolution field, and then that user can interact with the screen and choose the correct resolution. If you have things such as like a canceled status, it's pretty simple just to set that resolution to canceled. Same with done. Things along those lines. So just some best practices to think of when you're thinking about a workflow, regardless of if you're an admin or not. If you're thinking about your project, your team's workflow, think about how you can work it into Jira and how that step of that life cycle of your work item is complete, where that step is, and make sure you mark it so Jira knows it as well by using resolution. So I'm not going to add the resolution to in progress. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but it would just add another item on here. Here, once again, in an inactive workflow. If this was a draft workflow, we would have the publish button up here, which we would need to select. So let's take a look at that. So here I am in an actual active workflow that is currently a draft version of it. So I am able to go ahead and publish a draft if I made changes, which I have. I could discard the draft, which means just get rid of it. So next time you come into it, it's only going to have your updates. And I can view the original to see what kind of difference, what kind of changes I have made. I'm going to go ahead and select Publish Draft. It's going to give you a little screen here, and there's one thing that you could do. You can save a backup copy of this workflow. I can hit Publish. It's going to take me back to the scheme screen, but from here I know that I've updated that workflow and it is now live. Once again, one thing to think of, anything that you make changes to, if it is associated with more than one project, it'll make that update for all projects. Now, one area I want to talk about, and this will be our last area for today, is statuses. So in your Jira admin screen, once again in the issues view, you can go down here to statuses under issue attributes. And from here, you can add a new status, see all the statuses, and you can also update the location of your statuses. So if they can appear higher up, lower up, it's going to show you the name, the category, workflows that's associated with, the order, and the actions. Now you can also add a new status from here by selecting Add Status. From here, we can add a name, a description, the category, and a URL if we wanted to, so it could have a different image. We can also select an image, and this is usually the easier way to go around adding an image, because usually it gets a little bit tricky with the URLs. That status will then be added and can be ready for use on your workflows. I want to thank you for joining me today as we cover what makes a Jira project workflows. This was a long one, but as you can see, workflows are very vital in your work items life cycle from beginning to the end. And we only touched just the top of things that you could do. Like I said, with triggers, conditions, validators, post functions, there's a lot of things that you could do within workflow. I want to thank you for joining me today in what makes a Jira project workflows. I hope you continue viewing the videos in this series and all the other videos Release Team puts out to learn how to be more efficient in the DevOps section.